I still remember the day he walked away like it was stitched into my skin. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. It was a cold, gray afternoon when Daniel closed the door behind him without so much as a second glance. Our son Matthew, barely a year old, lay sleeping in the small crib we had crammed into the corner of our one-bedroom apartment. The soft whooshing sound of his breathing machine filled the silence he left behind. I stood there, numb, holding the hospital discharge papers in my shaking hands. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he had said that morning before packing his last bag. "I can't do this. I can't live like this. You and all of this." He gestured vaguely at the tangle of tubes and prescriptions that cluttered the kitchen table. "I need a life that's normal." Normal. I stared at the peeling paint on the walls and the stack of unpaid bills and thought, what part of life was ever normal? But I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I simply turned away, walked over to the crib, and picked up Matthew, breathing in his milky baby scent as if it could shield me from the gaping hole Daniel had ripped open. From that moment, it was just the two of us against the world. The next few years were a blur of exhaustion, fear, and fierce love. Matthew was diagnosed with spinal muscular atrophy, a rare and cruel condition that robbed him of his muscle strength but not his brilliant mind. By the time he was 3, he was in a small wheelchair, his little hands expertly maneuvering the controls with a kind of determined grace. We had our battles, with insurance companies, with government programs, with indifferent landlords who saw a wheelchair as an inconvenience. And every time I thought I couldn't fight anymore, I would look into Matthew's eyes. I so much like Daniel's it almost hurt. Except Daniel's eyes had given up. Matthew's never would. I worked 3 jobs: grocery clerk, nighttime receptionist, freelance writing, whatever paid enough to keep a roof over our heads and Matthew's medical needs met. There were nights when I ate peanut butter straight from the jar while studying grant applications for hours, trying to find some lifeline. Mornings when I carried Matthew down 4 flights of stairs because the building elevator broke again, and the landlord couldn't care less. But the hardest part, the loneliness. Every other mom at the playground had a partner, a second pair of arms to lift, to hold, to share the weight. Me. I learned to make one arm do the work of 2 while the other kept pushing forward. Still, the loneliness wasn't enough to make me regret staying. Matthew laughed. Matthew learned. Matthew lived. Then came the night I made the decision that would change everything. It was after another heartbreaking meeting with a hospital administrator, who told me that unless I could pay a ridiculous sum out of pocket, Matthew would lose access to a specialized therapy program. I sat in the parking lot, clutching the engagement ring Daniel had left behind on the kitchen counter the day he walked out. A simple band, with a tiny diamond barely catching the streetlight. I had kept it all these years. Not because of hope, but because part of me wanted to remember. Never again would I wait for someone else to save us. So that night, I sold the ring at a pawn shop for $800. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start something. At first, it was small, a fundraiser page called Matthew's Miracle. I shared our story not with bitterness, but with brutal honesty. A single mom, a bright boy with a bright mind trapped in a failing body, and a dream of giving him, and kids like him, a fighting chance. I never imagined how many strangers would respond. First it was neighbors, then old classmates, then people I had never even met, sending $5, $10, sometimes $100, along with messages that said, "For Matthew, for hope, for the mother who never gave up, for the fighter." Within a year, the fundraiser had grown into a full-blown non-profit organization. Hope Forward. We provided grants for medical equipment, therapies, even transportation for children in wheelchairs. At first, it was just me, operating out of our tiny kitchen with a refurbished laptop and second-hand printer. But then volunteers came. Nurses, social workers, even lawyers offering pro bono help. Each dollar stretched further than I thought possible. Each child we helped was a new story of resilience. And Matthew, my Matthew, became the heart of it all. In his small chair, with his gap-toothed smile and his unshakable spirit, he was living proof that strength had nothing to do with muscle. Meanwhile, Daniel. I didn't hear from him. Not once. Not a birthday card. Not a child support payment. Not a text asking if Matthew had survived another winter of respiratory infections and hospital stays. It was as if we never existed. And honestly, I liked it that way. Until, of course, the day fate decided it wasn't done with us. It started innocently enough. I got a call from a television producer, a woman named Lila, who said she ran a segment called Heroes Among Us for a major network. "We want to feature you," she said, her voice warm and excited. "Your story. It's exactly what people need to hear right now. Especially about Matthew." First, I hesitated. We were private people. I didn't like the idea of opening our lives to public scrutiny. But Matthew, 13 now, smart, mischievous, braver than I ever could be, grinned at me and said, "Mom, maybe someone out there needs to see what's possible. Maybe some kid needs to know he can do it too." And just like that, I agreed. The day of the taping felt surreal. They sent a car for us, a sleek black SUV with wheelchair access, and a kind driver who chatted with Matthew about his favorite superheroes. At the studio, makeup artists fussed over me, while Matthew made everyone laugh with his dry one-liners. When the cameras started rolling, I told our story. From the day Daniel left, to the night I sold the ring, to the first dollar we raised, to the hundreds of children now rolling, flying, dreaming because of Hope Forward. When the segment ended, they played a surprise tribute video. Dozens of families thanking Hope Forward for changing their lives. Matthew clapped and laughed and cried, all at once. I held his hand so tightly I thought it might break. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly have known, was that somewhere across town, in a tiny, dimly lit apartment, a man who once ran from his own family flipped on the TV and saw the life he abandoned, the life he gave up, the life that had blossomed without him. Daniel stared at the screen, slack-jawed, as my face filled his living room. As Matthew, in his shining wheelchair, told the world, "I'm grateful my mom never gave up on me. She's the real hero." Daniel gripped the beer bottle in his hand so hard it shattered, and for the first time in years he realized he hadn't escaped tragedy. He had abandoned greatness. For 2 days after the TV special aired, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Emails flooded in. Donations spiked. New families reached out, desperate for hope, desperate for the kind of miracle we had somehow pieced together out of broken dreams. Matthew couldn't stop smiling. He'd gained hundreds of new followers on his blog where he documented life with a wheelchair. His clever posts about things people say to disabled kids went viral overnight. It was a whirlwind, overwhelming and beautiful, until the knock at the door. It happened on a Thursday evening. Matthew was in the living room, excitedly video chatting with a group of teens he had met through Hope Forward. I was stirring spaghetti sauce on the stove, humming mindlessly when the knock came. First, I thought it was a delivery. We'd been receiving boxes of donated equipment and supplies ever since the show aired. But when I opened the door, I felt my stomach drop clean through the floor. There he was, Daniel, older, thinner. His once pristine hair now graying at the temples. The easy confidence he used to wear like a second skin had crumbled into something hollow and desperate. He held a battered baseball cap in his hands like a shield. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he rasped, "Sarah, saw you on TV. Hey." I had no idea. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me before Matthew could see him. My heart pounded, 1,000 emotions flooding me. Rage, hurt, disbelief, pity. But I kept my voice calm. "You had every opportunity to know," I said. "You chose not to." He winced, as if my words were knives. "I was scared," he whispered. "I thought he wouldn't make it." "I couldn't." "You wouldn't." I cut him off sharply. Not couldn't. Wouldn't. The truth hung between us, undeniable. He shifted on the porch, looking around as if expecting forgiveness to fall from the sky. "Look, Sarah," he said finally. "I'm not here to fight. I want to meet him. Matthew. I want to make things right." A bitter laugh escaped my throat. Make things right. Echoed. After 13 years. I thought of all the nights I'd spent alone in hospitals, holding Matthew's tiny hand as machines beeped and hissed around us. I thought of the time I couldn't afford Christmas presents and wrapped Matthew's favorite old books to make the morning special. I thought of the moments when hope felt like a luxury I couldn't afford, and how I fought anyway. And now here he was, asking for a shortcut through years he had abandoned. I took a slow, deep breath. You don't get to decide what's right, I said. Not anymore. Still, despite everything, I told him I'd think about it. Because deep down, buried under layers of scar tissue, I knew Matthew deserved the choice. Not Daniel. Not me. Matthew. So that night, after tucking him into bed, I sat beside him and asked, Baby, what would you say if Daniel wanted to meet you? Matthew thought about it for a long time. Finally, he said quietly, I'd want to know why he left. I think I deserve to hear it. Even if I don't like the answer. God, he was so much braver than I ever could be. The next afternoon, we arranged to meet at a local park. Neutral ground, wide open, plenty of escape routes if needed. I watched from a bench as Daniel approached, hands trembling, eyes locked on the small boy. No, the young man, in the sleek electric wheelchair, waiting calmly by the fountain. Matthew was the picture of quiet strength. Daniel sat awkwardly across from him. For a while they just stared at each other. Finally Matthew said, Why? His voice was clear, unafraid. Daniel swallowed hard. I was scared, he admitted. I thought it would be too hard. I told myself you and your mom were better off without me messing things up. Matthew tilted his head thoughtfully. You were wrong, he said simply. We needed you. But we made it anyway. Tears slid down Daniel's face, unchecked. He tried reaching for Matthew's hand, but Matthew casually rolled back an inch, setting a boundary, claiming his space. I couldn't have been prouder. After that meeting, Daniel tried to insert himself into our lives. He called. He texted. He sent expensive gifts. New laptops, tickets to basketball games, a shiny new electric wheelchair that Matthew refused to even touch. I saw it for what it was. Guilt money. But Matthew saw something deeper. One night, as I folded laundry, he said, Mom, he's not really trying to know me. He's trying to fix his own feelings. That's not the same thing, is it? I blinked back tears and shook my head. No, baby. It's not. So Matthew made his decision. He chose us. The life we had built. The family we had created from ashes. The community that had lifted us up when no one else would. He thanked Daniel politely for the gifts, but asked him, gently, firmly, to leave us alone unless he truly wanted to know us. Daniel never called again. And strangely, it didn't hurt. It was closure. Real closure. Meanwhile, the world kept opening up for us. Hope Forward received a grant from a national foundation. Matthew was invited to speak at a conference for young disability advocates. His first blog series was being compiled into a book deal. Everywhere we went, people treated Matthew like the hero he was. But the best moment, it came one night months later, when Matthew wheeled into the kitchen holding a piece of mail. He handed it to me, his face bright. It was an acceptance letter to a prestigious program in engineering for students with disabilities. At the bottom, a handwritten note. We believe you will change the world, Matthew. Welcome to the future. I hugged him so tight I could barely breathe. He laughed and said, Easy, Mum. You're gonna break the merchandise. But inside I knew we were unbreakable, because love, real love, was the strongest force in the universe. And we had it, not because someone gave it to us, because we fought for it, together. The day of the National Resilience Awards felt surreal. We stood backstage at the enormous auditorium, lit by crystal chandeliers and packed to the brim with thousands of people. Leaders, advocates, celebrities, all gathered to celebrate individuals who had overcome unimaginable odds. And there, in the center of it all, was Matthew. wearing a dark suit tailored perfectly to fit his wheelchair, a navy tie slightly askew, and that signature sparkle in his eyes. He was, without a doubt, the bravest soul I had ever known. When the announcer called his name, Matthew Carter, Youth Advocate of the Year, the crowd erupted into applause so loud it shook the rafters. I stood in the wings, my heart hammering in my chest. He rolled forward slowly, confidently, up the ramp to the podium. What I didn't know, what neither of us knew, was that tucked into the very last row of the balcony, hunched low in his seat, was Daniel. He hadn't told anyone he was coming, hadn't asked for permission. Maybe guilt had finally outweighed pride. Maybe he just wanted to see what he had missed out on. But there he was, gray, worn, and invisible to almost everyone, except himself, watching the son he had abandoned rise like a star. Matthew adjusted the microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. There was a pause, not of fear but of gravity. He knew this moment mattered. And then, with a voice clear as a bell, he began. When I was a baby, the doctors told my mom I probably wouldn't live past 5 years old. A ripple of emotion swept through the crowd. They said I wouldn't walk, wouldn't talk much, wouldn't thrive. They said my body was too weak. He smiled gently. But they didn't know about my mom. My hands flew to my mouth. Tears already stung my eyes. Matthew continued, his voice steady. She carried me when I couldn't move. She fought for me when I couldn't fight. She stayed when others ran away. She made sure I knew that my worth was never measured by my legs, or my arms, or anything I couldn't do. She showed me that real strength isn't in muscles. It's in love. It's in persistence. It's in never giving up. The audience was silent, spellbound. Then he did something I wasn't expecting. He pulled out a small, tattered object from his suit pocket, held it up for everyone to see. A simple pawn ticket, faded, yellowed with time. This, he said, is the receipt from when my mom sold her engagement ring to start a fundraiser. A ring that was supposed to symbolize love. But in the end, it only weighed us down. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel leaned forward, his knuckles white on the seat in front of him. Matthew's voice rose slightly, full of emotion. She turned something broken into hope, into a movement, into a future for hundreds of kids like me. He paused, scanning the crowd, and smiled directly at me. Today, I accept this award not for myself, but for her. My first hero. My forever hero. My mom, Sarah Carter. Froze. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then the entire auditorium stood as one. A roaring, thunderous standing ovation that seemed to lift the roof off the building. Flashes from cameras. Tears on strangers' faces. And Matthew, sitting there with the brightest smile I'd ever seen, pointing directly at me with a little triumphant tilt of his chin. "Come up here, Mom," he said into the microphone, laughter in his voice. "You're the real story." I stumbled forward, still in shock, as people clapped me toward the stage. I barely registered climbing the ramp. Barely heard the announcer shouting my name through the applause. When I reached him, Matthew grabbed my hand with surprising strength. "You did it," he whispered. "No," I whispered back, choking on a sob. "We did." He beamed. The photographer snapped a shot. A mother and son, side by side, unbroken, undefeated. A photo that would later be printed in newspapers, magazines, websites around the world. A photo that would become a symbol, not of tragedy, but of triumph. Far above us, in the shadows, Daniel sat frozen. He couldn't clap. He couldn't cheer. He couldn't even cry. He just sat there, hollowed out, realizing he wasn't part of this story anymore. He was the ghost at the edge of a miracle he abandoned long ago. After the ceremony, dozens of people wanted to meet Matthew. Reporters, authors, even senators. Matthew took it all in stride, charming and gracious. But when the crowd thinned and the night air turned cool and golden, he turned to me and said, "Mom, let's go home." And just like that, no fanfare, no pretense, we left. Side by side, Family. Oh. The next morning, a small package arrived at our door. No return address. Inside was a velvet box. And inside the box, the original engagement ring. And a simple handwritten note. I see it now. Thank you for saving him. Thank you for saving yourself. Goodbye. D. I held the ring for a long time. Then I slipped it into my jewelry box. Not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder that sometimes the things we think we've lost are really the things we're better off without. Hope forward grew. Matthew grew. The world opened wider every day. But at our core nothing changed. We were two warriors who had crossed the battlefield together. We were a team. Family. Not because of promises, but because of action. Because of love that never faltered, even when the world did. Because in the end, it wasn't the ones who left who mattered. It was the ones who stayed. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.